Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CALtalks. This is episode 3. We have a really exciting topic for you that's a little bit nearer and dearer to our hearts, but first, we're going to start off with something a little new. We're going to start off with a segment that we're going to be calling Left on Red. I probably should have introduced you two before, but Joel and Kenny, you guys want to say hi?
Yeah, hello. I'm excited to start with this new segment.
I suppose I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for inviting Kenny back.
Yeah, it wasn't my choice. So Left on Red is a new segment we're going to start at the beginning of the podcast. It's basically just going to be talking about, really briefly, what we've been reading since the last podcast. And I'll go ahead and start off. If you listened to the last episode, you knew that I recently picked up East of West, written by Jonathan Hickman, art by Nick Dragotta. Excellent book. I picked up volume 2 from the local comic shop about halfway through it right now, and it's only getting better. So if you were interested in that at all from the last podcast, seriously, check it out. It's really good. Another thing that I picked up, another book by Image. And if you don't know, Image does something pretty freaking sick with their volume 1s, is that they're like $10. So it's really easy to just pick up a new volume of something that you might be interested in. And that's what I did with this one. It's called Kill or Be Killed. It's written by Ed Brubaker, and it has art by Sean Phillips.
Oh, good.
It's really kind of like a gritty book. Without too much spoilers, a graduate school student is in a rough spot, and he attempts to commit suicide and fails. And at night, he's approached by a demon who says, "You would have died. I saved your life. Now, in order to keep living, you have to take a life every month." So it's kind of like a dark vigilante style book, gritty art. It's really gruesome. So if you're like squeamish or stuff, definitely stay away. I live for that stuff. So really interesting book. Another cool one. Probably going to end up picking up volume 2. And the last one I want to talk about is something that's really special. So late last year, IDW put out something in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle line that was what I'd say is kind of revolutionary. It's called The Last Ronin, and the premise of it is that you are dropped into a world where 3 of the 4 turtles are dead, and there's one that is trying to get revenge and honor the family, but is wielding all of their weapons, and you don't know who it is. It is shrouded in mystery. At the end of the first issue, it tells you who it is, and the second issue kind of jumps in and fills in the gap of what happened between the deaths of the other 3 and return of the Ronin. This story is amazing. It's really good. It's really gripping. The art is fantastic. It is a more gruesome take on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I am here for. Because, you think of TMNT and you think of Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah,
and
Cowabunga, dude.
Cowabunga pizza. But it is very much a little bit of like cyberpunk, a little bit of like almost like feudal era Japan samurai ninja type stuff. Lot of, hence the name Ronin. But that's really good. So yeah, cannot recommend that. Please check it out. There are only 2 issues out right now. The third one's slated for later on, but that's a really good series that I think you guys would enjoy.
Not to give any spoilers or anything, but as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan, The Last Ronin does hit you with the surprise on who The Last Ronin is, and I gotta give it to him. I didn't see it coming. So
they did it.
They did.
What I was gonna say is, Connor, I'm really excited for you to be reading Kill or Be Killed. Brubaker and Phillips are one of those dynamic duos, kind of like how Frank Quietly and Grant Morrison typically enjoy working together. But yeah, so they're a power creative team in comics. They typically lean a lot towards crime and noir stories. They're really big on those like stuff that you would see like on like probably like AMC, those types of shows. So anyone who's interested in say like a gritty noir story or something like Connor described, Kill or Be Killed, like maybe the idea of a vigilante story and a really, really interesting premise, you're probably not going to be disappointed going with anything the team does. I'm just going to go ahead and take the emptiness as an opportunity to talk about what I've been reading.
Go for it. By all means.
So something that was brought up last podcast episode is how much of an X-Men fan I am. So of course it makes sense that I am a weekly X-Men reader. I've been very much enjoying Jonathan Hickman's grand plan for the X-Line. So far we're in year 2 right now, which is being deemed the Reign of X, which the previous one was called the Dawn of X. So those comics all been very very interesting, and still are. I'm just waiting for these seeds that were planted in the mini series. I want to call it a mini, but it's probably not classified as that. Called House of X and Powers of 10. It was a 2 different series, those 6 issues each, that ran together to introduce Jonathan Hickman's approach to the X-Men line. And
it's more like a prelude.
It is like almost a prelude in a way. I've used it successfully to get a mutual of ours into X-Men, and now he is tailing behind me by like 10 issues. So about that, the X-Men line, one of the books that recently was announced, and the first issue came out on the 17th, which was last week at the time of this recording, is a series called X-Men Legends. Which, for those that don't know, X-Men Legends is a series that's starring famous X writers from like the 80s and 90s, telling stories that weren't able to be told while those creators were working. So for the first X-Men Legends issue, plus the one that comes after it, follows the writer Fabian Nicieza and the penciler Brett Booth working on this story following Cyclops and Havoc, who are brothers, and their discovery of the fabled third Summers brother, which ends up being this guy named Adam X, the Extreme, who is as 90s as it gets. He has a skateboard, Cowabunga dude, in the words of the TMNT. So that's something I've been really digging. I'm not the biggest fan of like 90s X-Men. I'm more of like 80s, 2000s era stuff. But it's kind of neat to be able to see a lot of these interesting characters being, played around with, because I only really knew about them through a podcast I listened to called Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men.
Highly podcast, by the way.
Very good podcast. They've been doing it since 2014, so it's 6+ years at this point, and they do exactly what the podcast title says. They explain the X-Men from the Silver Age all the way through, trying to get to modern as quickly as possible while being comprehensive. Anywho, that's that. Something that isn't X-Men related, though, that I think will kind of tickle the fancy of both you two, which is a series called Radiant Black, which is written by Kyle Higgins, who came off of a really stellar run on Power Rangers, and also wrote some of the issues for Invincible. So Radiant Black is a passion project of his where he's working with Marcelo Costa, who is the illustrator. And it's basically a book that combines elements of superheroes, Super Sentai, which is just the fancy word describing like Power Rangers type stuff.
Yeah.
Japanese, the Power Rangers in Japan is just called Super Sentai.
Yeah. So it combines elements of superheroes and Super Sentai and all that's kind of like fun, bigger than life stuff where you have like these costumes that are just like, they can be replicated, kind of like how the Power Rangers costumes are kind of like, they have similar parts, but they're all got, the different colors and so on. But the first issue of Radiant Black came out about 2 weeks ago or so. with issue 2 coming out, I believe next month. Very impressed by it. It follows this guy who kind of washed out of trying to be a writer in California and immense a lot of credit card debt. And it kind of just hit very close to home. I think anyone can really vibe with the feeling of trying to forge your own path and realizing that sometimes you are the only person who gets in the way. Like, the only person that gets in the way is yourself. And I feel like just in this first issue, they're touching on themes that I feel like are going to be very influential in the overall story. So yeah, that's what I've been reading.
That what was the Sentai inspired comic that you mentioned again?
Yes, Radiant Black.
Radiant Black.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds right up my alley because I love the Boom Studios Power Rangers run, so I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, this is by Image. So I have the first issue. So whenever we're able to meet up, I can loan it to you, or I think you can read it for free on their site. Because Image, wonderful thing, aside from $10 Volume 1 trades, is that Image Comics puts out issue 1s on their website for free of anything they publish.
Love Image
so
much.
Yeah,
they really.
Oh, sorry, no. I thought I wanted to slide in that before we even got too far from it, that like you had me sold at it being a Sentai series in the first place, but on top of it being Image, just with how much we respect them, it's like it's a match made in heaven.
Kenny, so I can stop rambling about comics, please ramble on instead.
Yeah, so as for what I had read, I know it might be dating this a little bit, but we did just have a huge winter storm hit us, and in this big old chunk of free time that I ended up having, I finally got to read Sentient, that Joel, you had actually gifted me, and so this one's a big one. In general, yes, but also for me, because this is the first TKO comic that I have. TKO being this really inspiring, upcoming new comic industry, comic brand. Sentient is actually this incredible, compact but well paced, tense thriller sci-fi story that I found myself I was trying to blitz through it because I just wanted to constantly know what was happening next, but also I was trying to slow myself down because I wanted to take in the art. The art has this not quite rustic is what I'm looking for, but it's almost little dirty, it's sort of like watercolor. It's got this watercolor look to it, where even when something's not supposed to look even when something looks unsettling, that sort of how am I trying to put it? When something is still supposed to look unsettling, it's still got this nice tone to it, So I found myself lingering on all the art through that one, and so that one was a really big plus for me, a really big highlight of being cooped up indoors, and I cannot recommend it enough, especially if you just want a short story that you're gonna love through it,
Yeah, and I'm glad that I ended up getting it for you because this book ended up winning an Eisner.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just the creative team of Jeff Lemire and Gabriel Walta being able to work on this book, especially because you introduced me to Jeff Lemire through a series called Descender through Image, and that has watercolor art and that kind of, watercolor-esque art. I won't call it strictly watercolor, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah, no, Descender is another big one that is not a recent read of mine, but hey, since you bring it up, I do recommend it as well. But before we get off on a tangent there, I wanted to take it back to the mid-2000s, hit the rewind button, and Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man was the other one that I got to sit down and enjoy over the course of this stay-at-home little extra quarantine that we had. Because Connor, before all this happened, you had lent me Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and I'd never had the time. I never found the time to sit down and read it, and there was no better time. And
it's and sorry to cut you off. It's funny that volume, the first volume, has been passed around from me to Joel, back to me, and then to Kenny.
Yeah,
because we all enjoyed it so much. So I keep talking about it because it's really good.
The thing is, you can never you can never go wrong with Spider-Man. Like, yeah, there might be a run or two that people don't like, you know? But Spider-Man is such an iconic character, such a down-to-earth character that he can appeal to anyone. You know? So Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man really goes into that. As you can tell from the title, based off, you know, the iconic term, you know, coined from Spider-Man media in general. Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man does a lot to focus on how he is human, you know, and how he's there for the little guy. And as maybe cliche as it might sound, there's a bit halfway through where it's about him helping out a Make-A-Wish kid, and it's like it pulls on your heartstrings, you know. It's one of those
that
where
one issue made me cry, dude.
It's one of those where it's
heart-wrenching.
It's a formula that you've seen often, you know, but they still get it just right, you know. You're not sitting there bored through it. You're sitting there entertained by what's going on and touched by what you're seeing this fictional character doing.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is that it's like it sounds. It's a lot more like small scale.
Yeah.
There's not a big like world-ending catastrophe. It is more friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, which is always a cool thing to read. It reminds me of the early days of the Ultimate line.
Yeah. And it has that understanding that because it's small scale, they don't need to bring in a bunch of big names. They don't need to bring in Iron Man and the Hulk and all that to try and make the story engaging. Yeah, you get a couple of big name characters from comics that come in, but ultimately it is a Spider-Man story. None of them steal the show from him. So yeah, that was just a nice, quaint little read. Both of them were fantastic, well encased reads, and I had a lot of fun through all of them.
I'm really glad you enjoyed Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man,
Mhm.
because that has, and it's such a shame because I think it stopped in 2019, right?
Yeah, it did, yeah. 14
there were
issues.
only two. Yeah, there were only 2 volumes ever released, and it's a shame because I for one really enjoyed it. My guess is that Marvel wanted to move on away from that small scale, but you know it was really fun while it lasted.
Yeah, thank you, Tom Taylor.
It can almost be classified almost like a mini.
It is.
'cause
I
it's
would
really-
classify it a mini, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But yeah, that was a fun one, and I'm glad that both of you guys enjoyed it because I enjoyed the heck out of it.
Again,
Yeah, thank you for introducing
it is so hard to miss with Spider-Man. It is so hard to miss with Spider-Man, you know? It is, how can you hate him? How can you not enjoy any second that you get with Spider-Man?
It's
The
very true.
whole point of Spider-Man is that he is enjoyable. There is never going wrong with Spider-Man unless you just completely like take the character, flip it upside down, and butcher it.
Like when he made a deal with Mephisto.
We don't talk about that.
Oh, like in one more day. I can talk about that.
No, let's not. That could be an episode to
Hey,
itself.
yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's have episodes dedicated to characters. Why not? I'm down.
Man, foreshadowing.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, moving on to the next little segment that we're going to be tacking on to the beginning of these podcasts, called the Poll Box. It's going to be some things that are upcoming that we're excited about, and I'll go ahead and start out. I only have 2. The first one, no, I talked about it earlier. Last Ronin, the 3rd issue is slated for early to mid-May. Fingers crossed that it doesn't get delayed, because there was, 3-month gap between issue 1 and 2, and I just read it yesterday, and I don't want to wait that long. I'm itching to read more because it ends off and whew, no spoilers, but I want more.
Yeah, fun fact, the first one came out on the 28th of October, and the second one came out last week on the 17th.
Oh, God. I forgot how much it got delayed. I can't keep doing this.
But you will.
I will, because it's really good.
Don't get me started on delays when you know Saga's my favorite.
I know Saga. But another one that I'm really interested in, with a release slated for March, for one of them, and I think fairly soon after with another. Marvel is going to start producing Alien comics, as in like Ridley Scott Alien. And with writer being Philip Kennedy Johnson, who did the Resurrection, Marvel Zombies Resurrection, which the Marvel Zombies series was always a fun look. But it's also done by Salvador Larroca, who I haven't personally had a lot, but I know that he did a lot of work for the Marvel Star Wars line, which has really, really good art. And just looking at this cover for issue 1 of the Alien line, I am hyped. But it doesn't just end there, because Marvel also said that they want to do a Predator series, and that eventually they want to tie them together to do an Alien versus Predator series. And I grew up with that stuff, and I'm excited because this should all, the Marvel Alien and then the Marvel Predator series should be coming out within the first half of 2021, which means that the Alien versus Predator series might not happen for a little while, but I'm still really excited. So yeah, that's what I'm really looking forward to.
I'll always think it's funny, just the fact that Alien vs. Predator as a franchise exists, just because Sigourney Weaver, who plays Ripley, has always been like, I can't believe they make this. Alien would certainly win, hands down. There should be no series. Alien just dominates.
Well, and the thing is that like she started that, but the real thing that kicked it off was that in Predator 2, in one of the Predator ships, there's a xenomorph skull. And they just put that in there just as like a quick reference.
Exactly.
And the fans went wild. And it spawned, 2 not so good movies. But when I was younger, I thought they were great.
We all thought they were great when we were younger.
We all did.
Yeah.
I guess to also give the solid release date, March 24th is what it says for the first one.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm very excited. The panels that they have on their website, like, it's really well done. It's really pretty, and they have a picture of the Predator standing on top of Avengers Tower, holding a robotic spine attached to an Iron Man head. And if that doesn't get you hype, I don't know what will.
That doesn't bode well.
But I'm excited.
I can't wait for the conspiracy theorists to start wondering how it fits into the Marvel canon.
Oh, it
doesn't.
It will somehow, some way. It's like the Legend of Zelda timeline. Everything loops back to Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, it's a 616-2.
Yep.
What is this, Final Fantasy?
Yep. It is now.
So Joel, what are you looking forward to?
Oh my goodness, I thought you would never ask. A few things actually. One, I will just say outright, I have never really given DC Comics a chance. There's nothing against their lineups. It's more so just Marvel got me at a young age and never really let me go even now as an adult. But something that I really do like, though, is Tom Taylor, who is the writer who did the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man series that we talked about earlier. So him and artist Bruno Redondo are about to take up the reins of the Nightwing ongoing, with the first issue starting on issue 78. And they start next month, and I'm very, very excited because having Taylor on a book basically means that immediately that book is going to get, and character and the whole mythos is going to get a boost, because that's what Taylor does. When he was writing All New Wolverine for Marvel, that was following Laura Kinney, who's the clone of Logan, the original Wolverine that I'm sure we all know and love. He really was able to convince people that this new person taking up the mantle of Wolverine is cool, and she matters, and she has a backstory and all these motivators, and made her feel real and not just random person taking up the mantle. Like, I can rant on about like how mantle passing has been done lazily throughout the years for comics.
Wait. Save that one. That's a good topic for another episode.
Sorry, redacted. Anywho,
Yeah, put a pin in it.
Anywho, I'm really excited for the Nightwing ongoing. I know Kenny adores Nightwing, and it's a great opportunity for me to try to feel some of that love for the character, maybe in the way that he does. So that's one thing.
Maybe someday we'll know exactly how much I appreciate Nightwing.
Maybe one day.
Some episode
Spoilers.
that we do.
The next thing I'm really excited for is a Vault Comics book that they announced yesterday called The Blue Flame, which is written by Christopher Cantwell with art by Adam Gorham. Christopher Cantwell is the co-creator of one of my favorite shows of all time, *Halt and Catch Fire*. And he also has done books for Marvel. He wrote Iron Man 2020 from last year, and then the Doctor Doom solo series, which ended up getting him an award, which is pretty cool. But that's really neat. I'm really looking forward to that, because if his approach to a drama is anything like he handled in *Halt and Catch Fire*, then I'm up for a very, very swell time. To give you guys a brief description of the series, is that the Blue Flame is a cosmic hero. The Blue Flame is a DIY vigilante that fights crime on the streets of Milwaukee, of all places. The Blue Flame is a blue-collar HVAC repairman named Sam Brosm. In the wake of a horrific tragedy, the boundaries of the Blue Flame's identity blur even further. Now, before a universal trial, the Blue Flame must prove that humanity is worth saving. But in order to do that, Sam Brosm has to save himself. Can he? Well, we're going to find out. Rather, I'll find out, since I'm the one wanting to read it. So, I've never tried anything by Vault. They're a publisher that came around in like late 2017, early 2018, specializing in science fiction and horror. And they have a very extensive lineup for this 2021 year, including, again, the Blue Flame. So looking forward to that one. And the last thing that I'm probably looking forward to the very most, it was something that I didn't know was being made, but is Fantastic Four Life Story. So a quick background knowledge on the Life Story. We won't call it an imprint because it's not that, but I guess the series, if you can call it that, at Marvel. It started in 2018 when Marvel announced that they were doing a series called Spider-Man Life Story, written by Chip Zdarsky and with art by Mark Bagley, which was going to compose of the entire history of Spider-Man from beginning to end, set against the key events of each decade. And it was created to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the character. So, with this Fantastic Four Life Story, I'm expecting to be blown away by incredible art and an incredible rendition of the history of Marvel's first family. I can go on and on about like how important it is for these types of stories to be made, what I would consider a love story, a love letter to a character or a group of characters. So I'm not going to really expect to be anything but blown away by this. It comes out, I believe, in May of this year. Looking forward to that. For those who think the Fantastic Four are a bunch of lamos because of what Hollywood has done to them, you're flat wrong, and I'm sorry you've been disappointed that way. I mean, if you're disappointed as a Fantastic Four fan, it's no different than being a Superman fan.
I think we were all disappointed that way.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah.
So there are also two that I'm looking forward to. Thing is, I know I talked about Saga last episode, and Image, as they're the publishers of Saga. Ever since they have put that out, I've always really been looking up to them. And so my two are actually both from Image Comics. First one I'm going to talk about here is Shadecraft. This one is intriguing. This one caught my eye from the cover art, and you know, it's don't judge a book by its cover. I say that's the reason why the art is there in the first place. So to anyone who thinks that, you know, whatever.
Yeah, anyone who says that hasn't read a book.
Yeah, basically.
What do you do? You just pick up a book and you're like, this feels good.
Hefty weight on this book. I think I'll read it. But so Shadecraft is following a girl by the name of Zadie Lou, who is, as they put it, afraid of her own shadow. The catch on it is not that she's like afraid of the dark or anything, but it's that she can see that all the shadows around her are coming to life. And it is this supposedly like horror thriller of like, how is she going to get through this? How is she going to combat this? How is she going to protect her family and herself when she can't even touch the shadows? And so just that alone was a really cool concept, and I know I'm preaching to the choir with Connor because he loves anything that involves shadows.
Well, I was also gonna say horror thriller, say no more.
Yeah. But it's also got like this really nice writer-artist duo cast of Joe Henderson and Lee Garbett, the likes of which, they have the Eisner-nominated Skyward series, and Joe Henderson is credited as a showrunner for Netflix's Lucifer, and Lee Garbett is credited for working on Captain Marvel, and so you really can't go wrong there either. Shadecraft, however, did not steal the show for me, as the other thing that caught my eye was another new series that Image is doing called Stray Dogs. The thing is, it is so wildly different from everything else that you see from them and from most comics in general. Hence the name, it is about dogs. And the first thing that had me sold is that it is Lady and the Tramp meets Silence of the Lambs.
Like, how the heck do you even combine the two?
Yeah.
Do you need more than that?
I don't know, but I want to find out.
So yeah, this one is also a suspense thriller. Some people might be turned off by the fact that the artist is My Little Pony's comic artist. But, I mean, you should always be willing to give artists a chance on their new franchises, So, just the absurdity of it all has my expectations through the roof.
Yeah, the thing with artists is that at the end of the day, you have to realize that it's a job for them.
Mm-hmm.
So don't judge them by what they work on. Judge them by the caliber of their art.
Correct. Because there are a lot of people who, especially in comics, they have to get their start somewhere. Not to say that My Little Pony is like a terrible start, but obviously has that negative connotation. And if we, as a consumer, were never willing to give them a chance because of that credential, then there's a lot of bigger problems that can come from that. So,
well, now that we're all on the same page there, if we want to move on, I've said my piece, and I'll leave it at that.
And the last segment that we want to kind of throw into our weekly rotation is one that we're going to be calling Off the Books. This is just going to be anything that is kind of big happening in the comic industry that we think is, of importance and that might, shed some light into the inner workings of everything. So, Joel, our resident internet sleuth, has got some things for us. If you want to go ahead and tell us what they are. Oh,
absolutely. So let's start with this. The one that I know that I will get some smiles out of Connor here. So Todd McFarlane, if you don't know who he is, he's one of the Image co-founders. He had famous work done with Marvel in the late 80s, early 90s. He did stuff with Spider-Man. He is also the creator of Spawn. And Spawn, I think it was last year, he got the award from the Guinness Book of World Records for having the longest running creator-owned superhero comic book, because Spawn hit issue 301. And that's a huge accomplishment. And with it now in 2021, he announced that Spawn is being turned into a shared universe. And that's launching this year. We have people of various artist backgrounds working on it. We have Art Adams, who you don't know is a very seasoned artist from, I'd say, the golden age of comics, the 80s and 90s. We have Jim Cheung and Frank Quietly as well, and many more. The series is pretty hyped. I myself may not be the biggest Spawn fan, but I can recognize that just this character and his staying power being now going to a shared universe, it's different. And I think that's something to highlight, because in comics now, a lot of the shared universes are there from the get-go and not started after years and decades of continuity. So I feel like that's very cool.
I'm very excited for the Spawn shared universe, because, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if it does work, it's going to be huge.
Yes, and not to say that it'll come into to be something that like rivals like a connected universe, like say at Marvel or a DC or even like anything that Hollywood is trying to push, but it's something new, and that's something to be said.
Who could imagine that Connor would appreciate a Spawn universe if only we had some sort of episode dedicated to him telling us about that.
Jesus.
Yeah, maybe one time. Maybe one day we'll have it. The next thing is the announcement of a new company that's based around comics. Not just comics, IPs and such. The company is called End Paper Entertainment. It was started by Rich Johnson, Sidney Barwick, Chris Longo, James Killen, and Jonathan Gilbreth. I don't expect anyone to know who they are, but just to give you the TLDR on that, they are a bunch of industry veterans. They have a lot of connections and have been a part of a lot of the major plays, or some of them, specifically I believe is James Killen, is the reason why book retailers like Barnes and Noble actually have a dedicated graphic novel section. He was able to show them that this is a market that has a lot of potential, and lo and behold, we're now in the current day where graphic novels are selling lights out for these brick and mortar stores and book retailers again like Barnes and Noble. So End Paper Entertainment aims to be this, not be all end all, but this all encompassing company that will create stories internally to start off, and they'll publish it through whatever medium it'll best exist in. So it could be a crime story that's written for comics, but they could turn around and say this would work better as a audio drama. So then they push it into being an audio drama. And I feel like that's very revolutionary for comics, because Hollywood has been the only major corporation or major entity in my mind that has taken properties from other mediums, say books, comics, and so on, and pushed them into the public sphere through their own means. And now this company is saying, we will do the same, except we won't just limit ourselves to TV movies. So I think that's really exciting, and I'm really interested to see what they do in this first year as a company. The next thing, and it's going to be the last thing I bring up, is something that I think is very near and dear to me, and should be for anyone who has a love of just comics and superhero comics, which is there is an audio drama following the life and times of Jack Kirby. For those who don't know, Jack Kirby was one of the original artists that helped start Marvel Comics with Stan Lee back in the 60s, and unfortunately has the tragic career of never really retaining any of the credits that belonged to him. And it was a fight that he inevitably ended up not losing, but never really quite winning either. As we can tell, Stan Lee became the face of Marvel, and everything became praising to him. Not to say that he didn't deserve it, but to show that there are two sides to the story. The audio drama is available on Spotify. It has 3 episodes as of the time of this recording, and I highly encourage anyone interested to kind of get to see the behind the scenes of how some of your favorite superheroes were made, because Jack Kirby did not only work at Marvel, he worked at DC as well, really helping them establish themselves in the 60s in a post Comics Code Authority era. I can go on and on about comics history and such, maybe in a different episode, but I think this is, out of all the announcements that I brought up here, is probably the most worthwhile one, because again, this man deserves all the recognition he can get, and it's just, again, unfortunate that it comes after he has passed. So
yeah, I'm confident in saying that is legitimately the most important announcement of all of them. You know, it's I guess it's arguable in some people's point of view, but legitimately that one is a big step in the right direction.
Yeah, and Jack Kirby was such a big influence that, and I know this because the 3 of us sat down and watched a documentary on the creation of Image Comics, which I fully recommend. It was phenomenal. But the people that started Image, I think it might have been Todd McFarlane who said, you know what, because Marvel always puts Stan Lee presents so and whatever comic it was, they wanted to put Jack Kirby presents so and so from Image. And ultimately that didn't pan out, because I think Jack Kirby's wife got mad at them because they were like, why would you do that? That's stupid. But the fact that they wanted to pay tribute to this industry great, I mean, it speaks volumes about what he did for comics.
yeah, it was Jim Valentino who contacted the Kirby residents in the 90s to let him know what they were doing and what they were really trying to stand for, because back in the day when Kirby tried to do that, like, comics weren't big enough for that to really mean anything yet. To like separate yourself from a publisher and say, I don't need you because you don't respect me. I'm glad that the industry has moved away from that, not shying away from giving credit where credit's due, especially thanks to Image Comics being able to allow creators to have creator-owned series and not have to rely on publishers like Marvel and DC who rely basically around their established IPs, henceforth their characters.
So getting on to what Kenny was hinting at constantly throughout these original segments.
I don't know what you're talking about at all.
The topic that we have for this week are we're going to be kind of diving into some of our favorite characters in comics. And I'll go ahead and start. And Kenny, again, alluded to this earlier when we were talking about Todd McFarlane and the Spawn shared universe. Spawn is one of, if not like the favorite that I have for comic characters. So I'll talk a little bit about him. So Spawn, he debuted as one of the flagship runners for Image Comics. It's not like Superman or Spider-Man, with like Amazing Fantasy. No, he headlined his own series, Spawn issue 1, that was published in 1992. Todd McFarlane was a creator who Joel kind of touched on a little bit. He worked on projects like The Amazing Spider-Man from 1988 to 1990, The Incredible Hulk from 1987 to 98, and the self-titled Spider-Man run from 90 to 91. Todd McFarlane, big name in the industry, one of the core members of Image, and he split from Marvel to kind of do his own thing. And do his own thing he did, because that first issue of Spawn sold 1.7 million copies. Some of the best-selling comic books like today, or like on average, sell like 100,000, maybe 200,000. I think the closest one was when Marvel launched their Star Wars line. They sold almost 1 million copies. But the fact that Spawn sold 1.7 million means that Todd was onto something. And Spawn retained this popularity until about issue 25, and then it died down, and then it spiked back up with issue 45, and from then on out, it became Image's, for at least a while, became their, like, bestseller. And his popularity kind of peaked around 1997 when the god-awful movie came out. I love the movie because I love Spawn, but I have to admit, it was not good.
Guilty pleasures. We all have guilty pleasures.
But the year after came one of my personal favorite things that Spawn has ever been in media, and I highly recommend this. The HBO animated series called Todd McFarlane's Spawn. It's a TV mature animated series that went from 97 to 99. It was graphic, it was gory, it was dark, and best of all, Spawn was voiced by none other than Keith frickin' David.
Woo! I was hoping you were going to bring that up.
Ooh. Of course, dude.
It's that silky smooth, that chocolate voice.
Yes, he is the definitive voice for Spawn.
Yeah.
So again, check that out. But a little bit more on Spawn. His name isn't obviously Spawn. Before he was Spawn, he was a man named Al Simmons. Highly trained assassin, one of the best of the best. So good that he was promoted to like the highest level of the CIA. He had access to information that the public didn't know, and he was sent out to eliminate targets that the government didn't want anymore. But he started to doubt the rationality behind this, and his superior hired his best friend, Chapel, to kill him. And Al died in a big fiery explosion and was sent to hell because of all the innocent lives he took. But while in hell, he made a deal with a demonic being called Malbolgia, because he wanted to return to Earth to see his wife again. But it came at a price that he hadn't foreseen, and he returned 5 years later with no memories of what he had done. All he could remember was the face of his wife. And this deal granted Al the powers of a Hellspawn, the general of Hell's army. and he was told to do Malbolge's bidding, but Al didn't want to. He didn't want to be this plaything, and he's constantly at odds with the forces of both heaven and hell. And a cool thing about Spawn is that it tackles a lot of kind of biblical topics. It's very much Christianity based, but heaven and hell do exist. God and Satan do exist, and like corporeal beings exist. But he's constantly being pulled between good and evil, and he ends up taking over the alleys that comprise Rat City, which is the it's kind of like a Hell's Kitchen in Daredevil. It's this location, and he ends up becoming kind of like a champion protector for the homeless, because he wants to protect people, but also he's not afraid to kill the mugger that's trying to kill you, that's trying to take your wallet. And he's constantly being pulled in two directions of morality by a homeless man he befriends called God, it's always hard to pronounce, Cagliostro, who turns out was a previous Hellspawn that lost his powers, and a demonic clown named the Violator, who is kind of like Malbolge's right-hand man. And they're both trying to kind of convince Spawn to use his powers for the sake of good or for the sake of evil. But what I really like about Spawn is that I'm a sucker for gritty and edgy content, as I'm sure both of you guys know, but the audience now knows.
Boy, do we.
Yes. But Spawn's design, straight out of the 90s, spikes, big gauntlet, big boot, chains, big red cape. I freaking love it. I dig his design. It's timeless, it's classic. And I really like the whole kind of like, he doesn't operate on like a kind of like a stricter moral compass like Batman does. He still has a moral compass, but he's also very lenient. He's not very black and white. He's very, kind of gray. And he'll kind of do whatever he wants. He started off as an anti-hero, kind of went into a hero, and then kind of shifted back towards anti-hero. But he's really awesome. I really, really like Spawn. But something that's cool that I know that not a lot of people that know of Spawn really know about it. He's not the only one to don the mantle of Spawn. Further in continuity, Al takes his own life after, and I think this happened around 2008. So it had been a long stretch with Al. But he took his own life because he didn't want to be a Hellspawn anymore. He wanted to rest. And the powers transferred to a man named Jim Downing, who maintained the mantle from 2008, roughly issue 185 to issue 250. So he maintained it for a pretty long time. But then Al did come back to the delight of all fans. But there are also some other really cool Hellspawn that I'll just briefly go over because they make me giddy. We have Lord Covenant, who's a Hellspawn from the Dark Ages during the Crusades of the 11th century. And this is in the storyline called Spawn the Dark Ages, which I highly recommend. It's really, really good, kind of a self-contained series. But he's not referred to as Spawn in the comic. He's always referred to as the Black Knight. And he is a brutal, almost like necromancer. It's really cool. Then we have Sir John of York, better known as Medieval Spawn. He appeared in like issue 8 very briefly, and then didn't appear again until Todd McFarlane, and Joel, you can help me out here if you know. He did a crossover with the guy who made Witchblade. I don't know if you remember.
I do.
Who did Witchblade?
I do know about Witchblade, but I'm not entirely sure what series you're talking about.
And anyway, he did a crossover with Witchblade with, which is another Image property, with Medieval Spawn. So he got a little bit more time to shine, and then, no spoilers here, but something happens, and previous Hellspawn from history come back to the modern time, and Al has to fight to the death with Medieval Spawn. That happened in early 2020, so fairly recently. And then the last one, which is one of my all-time favorites, Jeremy Winston, better known as Gunslinger Spawn, Old West 200 years ago. He's one of my personal favorites. You know, Al Simmons is always going to be there, but I'm a sucker for Old West, and his design is very much it's almost akin to Bloodborne, like that kind of like tall hat gunslinger type look. So that was awesome. And he also recently emerged in that same event where Medieval Spawn came back, and he came back in to the story around issue 308, and Spawn is, I think they're releasing 315 next week. But he's appearing to have a larger role in the story, which I'm all for because I love it. And then I'll end it with some other cool anecdotes that I think, because I can talk forever about Spawn, but I'll wrap this up. Spawn at one point fights the embodiment of Satan and God and wins, and he becomes what's known as Angel Spawn, essentially becoming God, and he can remake the world as he sees fit. It wasn't long-lived because Spawn didn't want the power and eventually resurrected God and Satan, leaving them with the memory of what would happen if they were to step out of line again, which I think is completely, like, you know, apologize for this, but badass.
It is badass.
And then in recent years, Spawn's gotten a lot of love too. Comic series past 300 issues, like Joel said, huge milestone for any ongoing comic, and especially with no universe resets like DC or Marvel. It's been essentially one ongoing story. He also recently made a guest appearance in Mortal Kombat 11, and Keith David reprised his role, and I was so happy about that. But a little known fact that not a lot of people know, that wasn't his first fighting game appearance.
Soul Calibur 2!
In the Xbox version of Soul Calibur 2, Spawn was playable, and I found out recently why. Namco wanted to sell merchandise. They wanted to sell action figures, and they needed someone, and Todd McFarlane, who owns McFarlane Toys, which is the biggest action figure company out there, were like, hey, we want to use you to make Soul Calibur action figures. And he's like, cool, only if you put Spawn in your fighting game. And they're like, yeah, okay. So they put him in the fighting game. You know, he sadly doesn't have his cape or chains, but his cape has the ability to shapeshift, and it turns into a battle axe that he uses, which is also kind of cool. And then the last really cool piece of news, Spawn's making his grand return to movie theaters via Blumhouse Productions. The movie is being written by Todd McFarlane and directed by Todd McFarlane, which is awesome because, you know, he created the thing. He's going to make it great. And we have some big names in it, like Jeremy Renner, who's playing Twitch, who's a detective, who's a recurring character. And none other than Jamie Foxx is playing Spawn, which I think is like the perfect cast for Al Simmons. So yeah, I can go on and on and on about Spawn, and I would really like to, but I would love to hear I'd love to hear what you brought, Joel.
Man, I just gotta say though, I am simultaneously extremely glad and extremely upset that you brought up the whole deal with God and Satan and him becoming God and bringing them back, because I was gonna bring that up about how much. Yeah, we were talking like what, a week ago, amongst other Cal members, about how comics have, for lack of a better term, a lot of bullshit. And man, Spawn has a lot of bullshit. And I just wanted to shine some light on how much I when it reaches that realm of absurdity, I love it. I eat that up. You know, it's just like what I was saying about Stray Dogs. The fact that I'm seeing a comic about Lady and the Tramp meets Silence of the Lambs. That incredible. I could go all day about how great that kind of stuff is.
Yeah, it's cool to see comic characters do completely wacky and insane things. And it's a little gripe that I have, because, you know, at some point it feels like the creators are just doing things to make a character relevant again. And I don't mean this in a bad way, and Joel, you might take offense to this, but when Daredevil gets Heimdall's sword and becomes all-seeing, things like that, I don't know, it kind of irks me, because
it's the role cool. What are you talking about?
It's cool. No, it's cool. but it is a little bit of an ass pull. But the reason why I don't have such a gripe about it with Spawn is that he's his own character. He's not tied to any other universes. I mean, yet. But you can do wacky things like that when you're in your own solo series, but when it's in like big crossover events, it feels like they're just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff. But I won't go on that because
is that Daredevil
that's
thing?
a whole, huh?
Is that Daredevil thing from Realm of Kings?
I think. I don't remember.
It's okay. I can look it up later.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take this opportunity to go ahead and start then.
Go.
Well, it goes without saying that I am a huge X-Men fan, and with it, I have a lot to say about, of course, the franchise. But I'm gonna focus on, in my opinion, one of the best members of the entire mythos and the original X-Man himself, Scott Summers' Cyclops. I know most of you guys may be thinking, oh, he's Cyclops, why not pick Wolverine? He's the real, he is the X-Men. Well, as good as a portrayal we got through the films because of Hugh Jackman. I was about to say Huge Jacked Man because that's not his name, but that is funny. Cyclops, just to put it lightly, really got shafted. He got shafted in the original Bryan Singer trilogy. He got shafted in the reboots. My God, how much it irks me to be thinking about him in portrayals. But let's talk about his actual home, the comics. Scott Summers has the unfortunate background of being an orphan, or a presumed orphan, as we'll learn through continuity, which happens to put him into an orphanage in Nebraska, helmed by none other than Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is one of those, classic villains for the X-Men where you see him involved in a story and your first thought has to be, what kind of shenanigans is about to happen? Because Mr. Sinister is the reason why Scott Summers is a tortured soul for the most part. Not the only reason, mind you, because I'll touch on that later, but one of the major reasons why Scott has all these, and to quote Kenny, all this BS that happens to him. Like I said earlier, he is the first X-Men. He was a part of the first class with Jean Grey, Marvel Girl, Bobby Drake, Iceman, Henry McCoy, Beast, and Warren Worthington III, Angel. Like I said, he was the first. He was the person that Charles picked as the model of what the X-Men could be. Obviously, we know them. We can call them what they are. But the first class was revolutionary because back in the 60s when Stan and Jack made the X-Men, it was kind of cool. You had a group of teenagers who had these powers, and they were going to fight Magneto, the master of magnetism, who can seemingly do almost anything because of magnetism. Don't ask me. And through it all the hardships that the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants put the X-Men through, and even all the hardship that unfortunately Charles Xavier himself put the team through, Scott always tried his best to be the leader for his team and his friends. And that's not easy. The more you become invested into a leadership role, the less of a friend you become to your peers. And it's not because of hard feelings, it's because it's necessary. I have a quote here that I wrote down. What is a leader but not someone who understands the bigger picture? Scott, being the leader of the X-Men and the definitive leader of the X-Men, thanks to Charles Xavier's raising of him and I would say grooming for negative connotation really, and getting him to be in that position whether he wanted it or not. Well, regardless if he wanted it or not, he was incredible at the position. He's a master tactician, rivaling those amongst the Marvel Universe. He's a master combatant and a master of geometry as well. I would say the only person who can probably come close to him is Captain America himself. In terms
Geometry
of
man
geometry.
himself.
Yeah. Throw his big disc, bounce off walls, hit enemy. Except for Cyclops' shoot optic blast off walls, hit enemy. Which, by the way, it's an optic blast, not a laser. If anyone calls it a laser, they're just plain wrong. You should tell them to their face that they're wrong.
Fake fan.
Fake fan indeed. He does not cry lasers. He doesn't... Anyways, digressing. Scott's tenure through the X-Men really brought him a lot of things, including his first major romance, which is with Jean Grey, who we know inevitably ends up turning into the Phoenix, and then the Dark Phoenix. And then dies. And then dies again. And then comes back, but then dies again.
Yeah, dies a lot.
Yeah, comics, am I right? So this romance came to be what kind of defined him as a character for a long time, and for the common fan, it's all they really saw in him. But don't let that cloud what he actually is, which is a man who is in love with someone he grew up with. Through all the hardship and all the comics writing stuff that Chris Claremont did through the 70s and 80s, he really, really enjoyed torturing Scott. And it's not because he deserved it, it's because the X-Men as a whole is a soap opera. So in a soap opera, what makes a soap opera good is the drama of it all. The tortured characters, the relationships, and how they become messy when they become too intertwined. All that juicy stuff that for some people they can leave it because it's just not entertaining. You know, we'll look at the CW. They make their entire platform off of dramas, and I can say the three of us don't really like that. But the X-Men is a soap opera I can get behind, though. Whether it be the engaging characters or whatnot, or the fantastic adventures, or even just the grand scope of the narratives, it just feels well put together and meaningful. Enough about that. Coming back to Cyclops now, there are a lot of mixed opinions about him. Obviously, I mentioned the adaptation portrayal through Fox. Not to say James Marsden did a bad thing, but I think the focus on Wolverine really started bleeding into the comics, where people were expecting Wolverine to be the leader of the X-Men. And, you know, thanks to Jason Aaron, he did that in the late 2000s. But Cyclops is the definitive leader. Him and Wolverine get along buddy-buddy, all fine and dandy. And, of course, even the whole romance with Wolverine flirting with Jean, you thought it started in the films. It actually started way back in the 70s with Wolverine being introduced to the X-Men through Giant Size #1. So going from there, Scott had to balance his life as a member of the X-Men and also to be a loving partner to Jean. As anyone can probably attest, it's not easy to try to balance all these responsibilities, especially when one, which is being a leader to a group who is marginalized and trying to do what's best, which is defend a world that hates and fears them. It's not easy, and it weighs a lot. Something that I find really inspiring about Cyclops is just the fact that how he manages to push through it all, even when he's not okay. Through the 2000s, thanks to Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly with New X-Men, we really got to see Cyclops become more human and not just this stoic figure of leadership. Because he is a pillar of the Marvel Universe. It's something that I think that, again, should not go without saying. You may think of the pillars as being like, oh, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America because of the MCU, but it's not. You have to think about the greater Marvel Universe now. So the 2000s really allowed Scott to show that he had his own feelings, he had his own worries, he had his own fears. During this time, during the New X-Men era, which is 2001 to 2004, Grant Morrison really pushed how broken Cyclops had become through decades of continuity, to the point to where by the end of New X-Men, we had him seeking counsel from Emma Frost, who had been an established villain prior to the series, which ended up turning into a budding romance between Scott and Emma, which, in my humble opinion, is a very healthy one, because Emma, being unbiased to Scott, really allowed him to grieve and to show that he doesn't have to be the strong man all the time, that there's more strength in showing your weaknesses at times as well. And I feel, again, that's very inspiring, because, again, when you're the leader, it's not your job to be people's friend, it's to be the person who makes sure things get done. And not a lot of people can handle that type of responsibility, or at least balance it well with their own lives. So all this to be said, it really pushed Cyclops to start thinking about, how does he fit into his own life? How does he fit into the X-Men now that Charles Xavier is away again for like the upteenth time? Because Charles Xavier, and I'll say this right now, is not a model character by any means. You're sure Patrick Stewart made him seem like he was just this old wise man who in a wheelchair, but he really is potentially the secret villain of the entire X-Men line. And I can go on that a different time, but I'm going to leave that where it is there. Through the 2000s into the 2010s, we have Scott really focusing on how he wants to be a leader, not how to follow Charles Xavier's dream, but what the dream means to him. He really started during this era getting tutelage from Magneto, who at that point had really stopped being a villain, just flat out, and wanted to be more of just like that extremist person who is well-intentioned, even if his practices are unorthodox. So you have this man who becomes the living embodiment of Charles Xavier's dream and Magneto's vision of mutant kind. And is it a balanced end product? Well, not really, because Scott, in the end, has his own opinions too. And he has to try to balance all of that. And it all culminates into 2012's Avengers vs. X-Men, where the Phoenix Force, the MacGuffin it is, comes back to Earth and is about to wreak havoc. Some context that should be known is that the X-Men had been decimated, rather mutant kind had been decimated thanks to the events of House of M. For anyone who's watching WandaVision, who knows if we'll end up getting those type of things happening soon, but nonetheless, the mutant population was left decimated because of Wanda's actions, whispering the famous words, "No more mutants," and decimates the population down to, I think, the last 3%. I can give hard numbers because Jonathan Hickman, in one of his data pages for House and Powers of X, goes ahead and breaks down all the mutant catastrophes that happened in continuity. The Mutant Massacre, the Genosha Genocide from E is for Extinction that happens in New X-Men. They're just not doing hot. So the X-Men see the arrival of the Phoenix Force as an opportunity to maybe reignite it, because the Phoenix Force in comics within Marvel is a living embodiment of life, essentially. Hence the Phoenix. So some generic superhero shenanigans happen where the Avengers start taking a stance saying, we can't let the X-Men get a hold of the Phoenix Force, we don't know what they're going to do with it, blah, blah, blah. Well, lo and behold, the X-Men get a hold of the Phoenix Force because they're the only group that knows and can understand the scope of the power of it instead of fearing it for what it is. There's a lot to be said about the X-Men during the 2010s, about how they are fit into the greater Marvel universe, and they're really seen as the ostracized group because, to plainly put it, they are. I went back and I said earlier, to defend a world that hates and fears them. Well, the Avengers are also defending a world, not necessarily that hates or fears them, but they don't get any slack. They get all the slack cut their way, but when the X-Men are on a mission and something goes wrong, it's not, oh, we know you meant well, as it's immediately, oh, why were you doing this in the first place? And as you can imagine, that doesn't really help a group of people who are marginalized wanting to help people further. So it kind of just pushes and pushes, and at the end of the event, we have the famous thing that I'm sure most people that understand the outcome of the event shows, which is, at this point, it's not really a spoiler, the comic's been out for like 8 plus years now. So I guess skip ahead if you don't want to hear it, but Cyclops kills Charles Xavier, and I, all for one, don't necessarily support the decision, but I think it's very much in character for him to have done so. For a long time, he was living as kind of like his prized pupil, but Charles really neglected the fact that Scott is his own man, and that there are, not only that, but Xavier is not a model father by any means. He may be a surrogate one because of the situation of Scott being an orphan, but he is not a parental figure that Scott wants to model himself after anymore. And that led Scott into being almost like public enemy number one, because the Avengers saw that happen and said, now Scott's an extremist. And I thought that was a very interesting point for his character, because in his mind he was doing the right thing, but everyone else, they took it as he lashed out with cosmic power and now he can't reverse it. Well, we all know it's comics, so everyone came back. So because I could probably go on much like Connor could have gone on a Spawn, let me talk about some of the things that I find really interesting about Scott. Not only is he, like I said, a masterful tactician, he has unparalleled, probably but only none other but the Captain America, Steve Rogers himself, spatial awareness. His optic blast can bounce off surfaces, and he's been known to be able to make uncalculable actions that in the moment you would look at him afterward and have to ask, how the heck did you manage to think of that? And the answer is, it's because he has to. He, as the leader, cannot be cut slack, and nor does he cut himself slack. And again, it just fuels that torment that he has with himself and the weight of responsibility. Another interesting thing that I think is cool is his relationship again to Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister has a fixation on the Summers bloodline because his goal is to use the genes of the bloodline to create someone powerful enough to stop Apocalypse. And I find that really interesting because Scott is just one man, and you can't think, well, this man hasn't even had a kid. Well, he's had a kid. He had a kid with a clone of Jean Grey that he at the time did not know was a clone, named Madeline Pryor, and their kid becomes, his name is named Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, otherwise known as Cable. We all know Cable. If you've seen Deadpool 2, he was played by Josh Brolin. Very good portrayal of him. But Cable is someone who is probably the definition of timey-wimey BS, to be honest. So I find that is a really interesting tidbit. And not only that, he, like I said, does not shoot lasers. He shoots optic blasts. His mutant power is that his eyes open a gateway to a realm of pure concussive energy. Not only that, he has a brother named Alex Summers, named Havoc, who also has energy powers, who does not emit it from his eyes, but instead his entire body at command. Yeah, so what's really cool about the Summers brothers is that the third one, Gabriel Vulcan, who's an Omega level mutant, for people who know Omega level mutants, there are mutants with powers that cannot be replicated by any means, whether it be science or whatnot. And they have unknown upper limits of what the power can do. So that's what defines an Omega level mutant. So Gabriel is an Omega level mutant with energy control. Gabriel was really introduced as this major threat in this event called War of Kings, which was when Gabriel tries to take over the entirety of space by starting with the Shi'ar Empire and kills, I think, Queen Lalandra, who is the heir of the Shi'ar, and he becomes the Emperor. And I feel like that was really cool because it's a whole idea. Something you should know about the X-Men is that they really very often find themselves in space. Kind of like how the Fantastic Four live there. The X-Men are there like every other issue, kind of. They have ties with the Shi'ar, like I just mentioned. Going back to really when stuff with the Phoenix Saga and Dark Phoenix Saga was happening back in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe. And yeah, I feel like those are the best things I can think of without going on a complete tangent, because if I was left my own devices, we would be here for another couple hours. Yes, Kenny, take us home, please.
Well, I think I might just do that. So, as you may or may not have noticed, everyone, all 50 of you listening at home, that's right, I counted. Connor has covered a little bit of a third party here with Image, a character of their brand. Joel has taken up Marvel's side, and I'm gonna scoot my way back over onto to DC to do a little bootlicking, I guess. I, for a very long time, longer than I can really even remember, have been infatuated with Nightwing. DC Comics really hit it home with this one for me. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. And also, one of those million times was said in a different Cal YouTube channel video that you're more than welcome to check out. But anyway, Nightwing...
As well as episode 1.
Yeah. And episode 2 of CALtalks. But anyway...
Every episode.
Yeah. So, comic characters who don't have superpowers, I find incredibly inspiring and endearing, because they are able to keep up with all these other characters who have superpowers through their own resolve, their own hard work, and all of that. You know, yeah, the Batman being the probably the poster boy of this, of being someone who worked to get where they are. You know, and so Nightwing really capitalizes on that. Nightwing is a character who has always been incredibly human. The epitome of, like, he is the best of us. He's the kind of character that other characters brag about him. You know, it's not, he never needs to brag about himself because it's always being done for him. First of all, Nightwing, Dick Grayson, was the original Robin. So he's already an iconic character in the comics history. being brought in to appeal to a younger demographic, and ultimately helping. He did settle in on that goal. Robin, to the more casual eye, appears to be just a sidekick. But over the years, as he spent most of his life, most of his young life with Batman, ended up learning a whole lot, because he started off a part of the Flying Graysons act in the Haley's Traveling Circus. His whole family were a family of acrobats, and their big shtick was that they didn't use a safety net. They were doing these incredible stunts, like picture perfect. There's never a mistake that they ever made. But Haley's Traveling Circus kind of got in on the bad side of the mob, and they sabotaged their act. And Dick Grayson was the only one who was not in the middle of a very large trick, where they had all fallen to their deaths, and he had to watch. Batman was in the audience.
If only they had a safety net.
If only they had a safety net. They probably would have sabotaged that too. That's another point. Batman was in the audience, and as someone who really related to having to watch his family die, he took Dick Grayson in, who didn't intend for him to be his sidekick, but Dick Grayson ended up finding out his little secret that he was Batman, and Batman, thinking it, taking some time to sleep on it, realized that he kind of needed a sidekick. He needed someone who could help keep him leveled out. He needed someone who he had a reason to come home to. He needed someone who could keep him from going off the deep end. He served a lot of purposes, not only physically, but mentally, And so Robin, as the mantle was passed on through different generations, because Dick Grayson did eventually branch out from his partnership with Batman, Dick Grayson was, I'd say, the most important Robin to Batman of all of them. Like I mentioned in the first CALtalks episode, that the relationship between Batman and Nightwing is kind of worked on. It's fleshed out in Batman Hush, which again, super recommend. And there's this great scene where it is Nightwing taking on this gang of goons, and while he's taking them out, Batman's sort of just sitting there watching, and he's thinking he is the best of us. He watching him fight is majestic. This is like freeform jazz. I fight with a tempo to it. It is meticulous, everything I do, but he is just go with the flow. It's incredible to watch. And every piece of media that features Nightwing and Batman working together, aside from all the different tellings of their falling out, from him stopping being Robin into being Nightwing, they're always so it's heartwarming getting to see Batman at his most humane, because Nightwing, I say, is the person that brings it out the most in him, more so than Jason Todd by a lot. Anyone who knows the Bat family knows Jason Todd, Batman, that's a shaky relationship there.
Yeah, and the thing with Jason Todd was that it wasn't Jason who humanized Batman, it was Jason's death that humanized him. Yeah, and that's where Dick Grayson kind of fits in, is that him being there and being alive and being Robin and branching out and them still maintaining that relationship, it helps Batman with his morals, it helps him with his humanity.
Yeah. And another thing too is that just the sidekicks to superheroes most often are represented as they eventually surpass them, and that's something that's really honestly beautiful for me to see. To see someone grow, and yeah, I know they're characters, I know they aren't real, but to see the work that gets put in over years and years as a character grows, as this personification of a human being grows, and to see them become better than their mentor, who is more often than not as well their father or mother figure. These people become parents to them, and to see the pride in these mentors as they see that this person has become better than I have. I've taught them what I could, I've trained them how I could, and I've done what I could, and now it's all in their hands, and I think that they're doing this excellently. Nightwing is always quick to make friends with people, because he's just sort of this like down to earth kind of guy. Yeah, he's quippy and he'll be sarcastic and he'll be witty, but he's always there to help people. For example, like Superman. Superman told him when he was in the in-between process, when he had quit being Robin and he was trying to find his identity, because that was his whole character arc when becoming Nightwing, is he was trying to find his identity. Robin is always meant to be in the shadow of Batman, and by that point he was like 19. They were going through him and Batman were going through some rough patches with their father-son relationship, and he had stormed out on him. He was trying to find himself, and Superman, because I mentioned it briefly earlier, don't get me started about ranting about how misrepresented Superman is. Superman is the most human of us all, and that's the irony of it, because he's not from Earth. He's not human. And Superman tells him this story about a like this legend of these two heroes that were just sort of passed around, these rumors, this fairy tale. And one of them was named Nightwing. And when he sort of got into telling him this story, he took the inspiration from that and decided he would take up that name. He would become Nightwing, and he would watch over his own city. He would be the Batman for a whole different population of people. And he really showed this dedication to the people by also becoming a policeman during the day. Nightwing became a cop so that he could protect people day and night, no matter what uniform he was wearing. And there is a toll on his sleep schedule, of course, and I mean, I feel that myself, and I don't even fight crime during the night. But to see his personality still stay strong, to see him never be bogged down by anything, is incredible. Because he goes through a whole hell of a lot. He has to see Batman die multiple times, which is his dad. Again, Batman adopted him after his first family died. His biological family died. And so he ends up having to see Batman die. He ends up having to see Jason, or not see, but hear about Jason Todd, the second Robin, die, knowing that, that was Batman's fault. At some point, it could have even been him, all these different experiences, as like I said earlier, comics do have a lot of bull. He sees zombies. He sees Batman's son, Damian Wayne, turn out to be this brat. That then through him just being Nightwing learns to appreciate because he is a real understanding person. He is a real, like, I'm there for you, you can have your space kind of person. And on top of that, just the things he's capable of. He is like one of the only people who's stealthy enough to sneak up on Batman. He can keep up with Batman in his martial arts. He is just as skilled as Batman with his detective work. He is more skilled than Batman, really, with technology, too. Barbara Gordon, who becomes Oracle, who is he's the tech, like, resident tech person for Batman and the Bat family. She sets up, all these security measures and whatnot for the Batcave, and he just takes down her firewalls for fun. He learns so easily. There's a point where it's him and Superman working together to save Starfire on this like alien ship that she's captured in. And he just hacks into their system, no problem. It's a different language, whatever. Hack into it like it's nothing. There's almost like no bounds where he can't reach. And when he eventually takes up the mantle of Batman, it is a big deal because, like I said, him becoming Nightwing is all about his identity. He had this struggle of who he was and who he wants to be. And Gotham needs a Batman. The world needs a Batman because he's not just a superhero, but he's a symbol. And he takes up that mantle. He bites the bullet. He decides, I'm gonna help Damian. I'm gonna help the Bat family. I'm gonna help the people of Gotham. I'm not doing this for me. I have to do it for them. And there's just so much about Nightwing that I think is so inspiring and endearing, outside of just being able to keep up with the other superheroes. It's his work as a leader for the Teen Titans. It's his relationships with other people. It's his personal relationships. Like when he goes and dates Barbara Gordon, goes and dates Starfire. There's just something so unbelievably perfect about him to me. I know that's so like biased, that's so just personal to me, but everything seems to resonate with me. That he is the epitome of like what people should strive to be. You know what I mean? Also, his excrement sticks are cool. You know what? I don't mind saying
They really are. No, they are really are.
the
cool.
costume's cool. The instrument sticks are cool. I love them.
So speaking of the costume, what's your take on like first run Nightwing with the mullet and the sequin?
So that's one of the things where you start off hating it, and I think legitimately the more you look at it, the more you love it. I will never say that like the black and blue, like the modern takes of the costume. I'll never say that they're bad. I'll never say that they aren't the best, because you know what? There's a reason it's stuck around for so long. But that original, like, tights, mullet, giant collar, like, blue, yellow, and lighter blue.
Vest.
Yeah, no, like, I think it's legitimately, there's something incredible about it. And it might be dipping into that thing I was talking about earlier, about how I just love the absurdity of things. I love when you dip into that area of, like, this is too crazy to not appreciate. Maybe it's that, but it really grew on me, I don't even know when. I know I hated it at first, but I love it now.
Yeah, something about comics. The rule of cool. If you're not down with it, then you're not going to have a great time.
Yeah.
That's very true. And I have one more question for you, and I will judge you on this.
Oh.
Are you Team Barber or Team Corey?
That's the thing, man. I don't trust anyone who can pick a side. All right? I don't trust...
Oh, I'm Barbara Gordon.
I think...
See, I'm in the boat with Kenny. I can't pick.
Barbara Gordon.
I also think that a sleeper hit is him and Zatanna. No one ever talks about him and Zatanna. That's still a great one, especially because Zatanna is chef's kiss. But
yes.
But I don't think that you can confidently pick a side between Barbara Gordon and Starfire Coriander.
You mean no backwards talking magician girlfriend?
Again, like she's that sleeper hit third. She's that unnamed that Jack Kirby of Nightwing relationships.
That's a good illusion, dude. That's good.
Way to bring it back.
I'm not trying to say that Zatanna's relationship with him doesn't deserve to be there. I think the three of them should be considered equally. But the question is Barbara Gordon or Starfire, and I cannot pick, and I don't think that we should have to pick. I know that there have been mistakes in relationships. I think everyone makes mistakes in their relationships. But he just meshes so well with so many people that it's just even, man. It's just even to me.
I have a question.
I have an answer, probably.
Has Nightwing himself ever taken in a sidekick?
Technically, yeah. So when he takes up the mantle of Batman, that means that he is working with, at the time...
Was it Damian?
Damian, yes. Damian was the Robin at the time. And so that means that he ended up taking over where Batman left off. Red Robin, Tim Drake, was also there, but of course not as Robin. That was when he had already established himself as his own person, his own hero. And the thing is, Damian is much less a sidekick to take under your wing and more someone who just needs to learn how to act. You know, because...
He's a burden.
Yeah. I wouldn't go as far as to say burden. Damian Wayne, there's a very specific way that he needs to be written to where he's written right. And legitimately, it's going to sound crazy, but the animated Harley Quinn TV series that's on the DC Universe streaming service, while every character is still a parody of itself, there is at least one thing that is still very, very accurate to the character. And... their interpretations of Superman, Damian Wayne, certain other characters as well, still parodies, still extremely accurate. Like the episode that they're featured in, Harley Quinn, because the whole deal is she's struggling to find, actually kind of find her identity too. She's trying to establish herself as her own villain and not just Joker's side piece. She decides that she cannot be considered a true villain until she has a nemesis. And she tries to make Superman her nemesis, kidnaps Lois Lane, tries to get Superman in to fight her. She can, use the tabloids, use the newspapers and PR to say, like, hey, Superman is my nemesis now. Lex Luthor can, go sit in the corner because this is my time to shine. And instead, Superman bursts in and he lets Damian take the spotlight because
God, that's amazing.
Have you guys seen the Harley Quinn show yet?
I haven't.
So it's fantastic. It really is. Superman bursts in. He makes sure Lois is okay. He's like, "Hey, you all right? You don't need me to step in?" And she's like, "No, I'm fine. This is Harley Quinn. She's a joke." So I'll be fine. See you at 8 for sushi, and he's like, I'll be there. And Superman looks at Damian, and he's like, yeah, you guys have fun now. Don't stay up too late. And he flies off. And Damian, because he's a brat, he's just immediately starts taking to it like he's better than everyone, and that Harley Quinn is his nemesis, and she is belittled by the fact that a child is claiming to be on par with her, you know? And so, legitimately, Damian is still a brat, but super enjoyable to watch in that episode.
He's just well written.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. He can be done right. So when it comes to loop it back, when it comes to Damian being a sidekick, it is that Nightwing is basically showing him how to be personable. You know, how to be a hero. And Damian already has all the skills he needs to be a hero. He just needs that social skill because he wasn't raised with it. And that relationship between him and Damian, I think, shines as one of Nightwing's best, like one of Nightwing's most noticeable, because Damian is so standoffish with everyone. He is so hard to pin down and just work with, and he looks up to Nightwing.
Yeah, I find that very, very, not, I want to say interesting, but just overall just cool to hear Batman's first sidekick, and eventually, and you can compare it this way, very first, like, son.
Mm-hmm. It undoubtedly, it is his first son.
Yeah, his first son now being put on to go through years of continuity to now have Damian exist, and Nightwing's like, I was first, he loves me more. Even though he probably doesn't do that.
That's exactly how it is, though.
That is the thing, is, and I don't mean to drag it on. There are a million things that I forgot to talk about Nightwing about, and a million things past that I could continue talking about Nightwing about. Nightwing really does shine as, you know, the whole thing about, like, your parents have a favorite, and if you have to ask if you're your parents' favorite, then you're not the favorite. I wholeheartedly believe that Nightwing is Batman's favorite, just like how he is my favorite. Like, Nightwing was the best success for him. Canonically, unless I'm just not remembering one, Nightwing has never died either in the comics. Nightwing has always been able to persevere, push through, and make it to the end. Whether I think
in main continuity,
he
hasn't.
Yeah, canonically, he hasn't. In things, there was like the Injustice storyline where he died. There was the one I was telling you about.
Deceased. I know he died and deceased.
The recent comic run I was telling you about, I can't remember exactly what it was called, DC Death Metal, I think, where it was Nightwing. So get this. So this isn't canonical, if I remember right, but this is a post-apocalyptic world where most of the superheroes have all died, and Nightwing is among the small handful of superheroes that have survived, and he is leading all the survivors of humanity. And there is this monster, this like world-leveling rank of like danger kind of monster that is attacking, and Nightwing pulls out a guitar pick made of kryptonite with his emblem stitched in, and he wields a guitar that the base of it is at the shape of an axe. And now, for everyone who doesn't know out there, the Green Lantern, you know, like Green Lantern, the Green Lantern Corps, the main enemy, I'd say, aside from Sinestro, is Parallax. It is this Galactus kind of opponent. And the name of his guitar is the Peril Axe.
Which is so awesome.
And it's powered by a bunch of Lantern Corps rings, Green Lantern, Blue Lantern, Orange Lantern, all the different Lantern Corps rings is powering this thing and channeling this kryptonite pick to strum out just deadly sound waves. And he's got this big, like, Conan the Barbarian muscly body and hair, and it's incredible. He's the only character that I could see in DC ever pulling that off. And it's just, every time they do something with Nightwing, aside from Injustice Death, I think it's handled brilliantly. The thing with the Injustice Death that I'd say was handled right, because he dies in a really dumb, stupid, like, that should not have happened way.
Yeah.
But then once he dies, because it happens in the middle of an Arkham Asylum prison break, once he dies, like, literally everyone stops. Everything goes silent. Heroes, villains alike, they just stand there and they understand the gravity of the situation. They understand that, you know what, the villains may not be on the same side as Nightwing, but that is a tremendous loss for Nightwing to have died. and they all give a moment of silence as Batman just carries his limp body out. And then eventually he becomes the new Dead Man. So I guess it's not all bad, but again, not canonical.
But still cool.
Still super cool. Still, like, yeah, I think they fumbled it with how he dies, but then they really do pick the ball back up with that moment for him.
Woo! That was a long one. Sorry about that, y'all. We really hope you enjoyed listening to the CALtalks podcast. Thank you again. You guys are the best. Yes, you listening, you're the best. We appreciate you. Before we go, though, if you like what you see or what you're listening to, feel free to keep checking back here on YouTube. We're also on Spotify. Just search us. We're under CALtalks Podcast. We have the first 2 episodes up right now. This episode will be going up there. Keep checking back in those 2. We also have some social media accounts. Our Facebook is CharactersAtLarge. Twitter and Instagram are at @Cal_stories. Twitter is at Cal_stories, CAL. Instagram is at Cal_comics. And we have a subreddit, r/CharactersAtLarge. Check us out on our website, CharactersAtLarge.com. We've started posting the episodes there. And we are doing away with the heavy editing videos. We're now going to be offering a visual companion on our website. The audio file will be there, so you can listen and look for the photos all at the same time at your convenience. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. We really do appreciate you. You guys have anything you like to add?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk about X-Men.
Yeah, thank you for sitting through my rant about how great Nightwing is, because he really is.
He really is great, though.
And because I'd love to do a part 2 on this, so if you want to hear more about Nightwing, then feel free to hit me up.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to talk about our favorite heroes and comic characters. We plan to keep these more fun topic episodes coming. Hope you guys are excited to see what we have in store. Again, thank you guys for listening, and we're going to go ahead and say goodbye. We hope you have a good night, and if it's the morning, we hope you have a good day too. Take care, everybody.
See you, friends.